I'm BrianVee, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Ester Lee. Ester Lee is a nurse down in the United States. So, what I want to do is track through her work journey, but also find out how 2020 has been for her. Join me in this conversation with Ester Lee. I'm BrianVee, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Ester Lee. Good evening, young lady.
Good evening, Brian. Thank you for
Thank you.
having me.
Well, thank you for coming. You and I were just saying, I think we're family, but I don't know if there's a proper word for it. Maybe someone can let me know if there is. You're my dear wife's sister's, yes, my dear wife's sister's husband's sister. So it
I'm
could
your
be some,
in-law's in-law.
you're my in-law. So yeah, maybe we'll just go with like sister-in-law. That might work. That might work. Thank you for coming on. I did a little introduction about you just a moment ago, and would you do me the honor of just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll start from there?
Yes, my name is Esther Lee. I'm a registered nurse here in Alamogordo, New Mexico, in the United States. I'm 42 years old, and I've been a nurse for about 12 years now. I've lived in the United States mainly in the United States since 1986, even though my dad was in the Air Force. We traveled around a lot during my youth. Um, let's see. Being a nurse is not my first career. I worked in the nursing home as a dietary aide, which is in the dining hall of the local nursing home, and that gave me a start while I was getting my education as a nurse.
Very good. Esther, before we get into like what other things you did or even the dietary aid, what was your first job? So you're talking about in 1986 you would have come to the United States because your father, not come to the United States, your father's American, but you were, so there's around 10 years old if my math is correct.
Mhm.
Um, what was your first job or something that it got you out of the house to do for whatever reasons?
I was also a bagger at the local commissary on the Air Force Base.
How old were you then?
Mm, I think about my 20s, my about 20 years old, maybe 18.
Was that your first job, your first paying job?
My first paying job.
Why did you decide to do that? Why did you get out of the house to get a job?
My parents were very um, keen on giving me some work experience,
Okay.
and they just because I didn't really have any education, so that was, and I at that time I had access to the Air Force Base, and my mom was also a bagger at the commissary, and so through her, she was able to get in a good work with me with the bagger, and it, what from my point of view, they looked like they were doing a neat thing, packing bags and carrying it out. And I thought it would be a good idea to start my work experience, get some little extra money instead of allowance from mom and dad. So,
Did
um,
you did you really think that you did not want the allowance anymore? Did you say, I'm a worker now, no more allowance, I don't want that? Or was
well,
that just part of the
and
deal?
plus the stipends that came with getting allowance, like work and other things. So I kind of, in a way, I was trying to avoid doing that. And for some reason, it just felt better to work outside of the home instead of inside of the home.
Yeah, maybe some people are not as appreciative for the work they do in the home, and the wage tends to be below the average. And there's no tip. The funny thing, I'd like to talk about a bagger. right?
Mhm.
Because I've had experience with American commissaries and stuff through your brother,
Mhm.
through people we've befriended here in Korea, and that's new to me. I'm from Canada, and maybe I'm just from a small town that does it. There are beggars, or I think there's probably another name for them, but it's not like a separate job necessarily. Like they could be going and stocking, like a stock boy or stock girl or stock person, and then if a cashier is busy, then they call someone to help, or if someone needs assistance. It's interesting because I have a view which maybe you can shed some light on with banking because I think we were in Texas and your brother took us to a commissary and we went and bought just some little things. And I'm like, there's a bunch of ladies sitting down there. They're not hanging out. There might have been a couple gentlemen too. And they're just hanging out. And then someone's like, do you want me to bag your stuff? I'm like, no. like 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 I think we had a thing of juice or something, whatever they were buying. And I'm like, no, we're good. And then I think maybe your brother, something, maybe my sister-in-law, your sister-in-law, said, no, they do that and they're working, but they work by the tips. So what is it's foreign to me being Canadian where the job would be they get their regular pay and then they do whatever's needed around the store, but these people are just there waiting to do this sort of bagging. What
Mhm.
is your coming out of 20, 30 years later, well, 20 something years, 22, what what is your view of the bagger being growing, obviously growing up in that? Maybe it does that happen throughout other department stores in the United States as well, or is it just commissary?
That's a military, uh, military unique to the military
So what do you think of
experience.
that? What do you think of that? I think it's good for people who do it, but I don't know if I fully understand it, or um, I find I
wouldn't
find
recommend it as a career.
but I think what was it there was who was the guy on the Cosby Show that was filmed, what was his Alvin was filmed like out
Mhm.
of just randomly at just like a couple of years ago, whatever it was now, bagging groceries. Would he have been doing the same thing, or was he just working for as like a stock person?
I think he was working in a retail, but I mean, it depends on the policy of the store.
Yeah.
But
What do you think about that, especially having worked in it? You said your mom did it, and being relatively close to the military, having your brother been having been and your father
mm,
working in the military. What do you think about that? Besides being as a career, it might be a tough gig, but as a job.
I think it's a fairly good job. I mean, from my point of view, I mean, it's sometimes you got low days, sometimes you got high days, sometimes you got ordinary customers, sometimes you got customers who are just totally nice. It's one of the it's just an amazing. I mean, no, I it it's hard to really explain. It's just you either love it or you really hate it.
What
Hate
was the
it.
need? What was the I mean, maybe it goes back decades, I'm not sure. But what was the need? Was it the need to get the people who were, because they tend to be older people. I didn't see that many younger people, but you were 18, so obviously you break that mold or that idea of mine. Is it these people are needing a job, or you're saying it's more a commissary? So is it like for veterans who may need help? What who's what initiated that particular job, especially since it's not like other department stores or grocers?
Mhm. Um, Probably one of the things is we're not on a payroll, part of the payroll, so there is no tax liability
Okay.
of us. And um, for, I guess, for whatever reason, they could not spare personnel to bag
Yes.
groceries.
Yeah.
And cashiers, depending on the order, the cashier would be overwhelmed that they ended up doing it just by themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's interesting. I have a little uncomfort with it. Like, you feel bad if you say no because there's people sitting around looking for work. But I'm like, I just need to put my juice in the bag. Like I'm okay. I think I'm okay, right? But then I feel like a little guilty. Like, well, maybe I should, and then I should just give them money for doing something I could have done. But I know that they're needing the money,
Mhm.
right? I need the product, but I don't know if I always. But I see if there's veterans, if it's in the military, veterans coming through, and I've seen just the limited amount of times I was there, people in wheelchairs or walkers and those sorts of things. For them to get their cart to the cashier, and then thereafter all those other processes, I see it as helpful for people. But I'm like,
Mhm.
no, I really think that like your brother we were buying juice or something, like really. I'm like, no, I think we got it. I'm pretty sure. But maybe they're just, asking anyone because anyone, I guess they're kinder than I am. But I was wondering, but that's great. So you did that job into 18, and this is obviously are you in high school at this point?
No, college.
In college at 18.
Mhm.
So backing up, so your first job, you were in college. So all the
Mhm.
way through, you didn't have to work. So I know that you took a Bachelor of Nursing. What got you on that path then? When did the idea of you getting into nursing start?
Um, Early on, I mentally juggled what career I would have, and
When did you start juggling?
um, um,
Like what turned you on to this or that? And at around what age?
to be honest, I had a major car accident in 1998 when I was 20 years old,
Okay.
and um, I broke. I had a single car rollover on the highway, and I broke my C1, C2, and C5, and I was hospitalized for a while. And I, being a nurse was one of I was um, I wanted to be a nurse, but I didn't really want to be a nurse until the accident because I was hospitalized for at least 3 months for my bones to heal, and I was just so amazed about the kindness and the work effort that the nurses around me had.
It's I mean, you can put a list of them, but any of these like first responders type things, my whole life, like people say, oh, I hate the dentist. Okay, I understand. You don't want to get your teeth drilled, but they're there to help you. Oh, I hate the police. I, I understand if there's some issues going on, but they're there to help you. Oh, I hate the fire department. I understand maybe somehow you could hate the fire department, but they're there to help you. Oh, I don't like the doctors because I understand, but they're there to help you. Nurses as well. It's the same category for me. And my whole life, whether small or a little bit more major, nurses have always been so kind and gracious and helpful. And all of these professions, they make me want to do them. Like this is why this podcast exists, because I meet people that do their job so well that I admire them, say, oh, if I had your talent, I would want to do it. So you're saying
Mm.
you were juggling, what were you juggling between what thoughts before going to college?
computer pro-
Computer program
Computer.
in high school?
Mhm.
So in high
Uh,
school, you're thinking I might want to be a computer programmer or
mhm.
something in the hospital, but you weren't sure about it.
Yeah, or astronaut, or so,
Well, that's
some of
great.
the sciences, and then My mom was a major, I would say, would be a major influence in my career
Hmm.
decision
Yeah.
because she wanted me to, God bless her, she wanted me to meet her husband, and I don't know if it would be a doctor or a physician assistant or something, but she thought it would be a good um, role to be surrounded by eligible men who
You
had a
gotta
career.
love moms, right? You gotta love moms. My dear wife's like, okay, if we could just get you in this position, it's not like, I mean, there's a lot of jobs where we could give examples which are the opposite, but like, okay, let's put you in a hospital because that's where you're gonna meet a doctor. Like, she, as you said, like, bless her. She she had a good hope for you, right? And
Mhm,
you're in the right spot. So
mhm,
so you were dealing one with computers or science, and so you're dealing with stuff versus dealing with people. So you had that dichotomy of a choice. And then you got into, so you obviously applied for the Bachelor of Nursing. So, but that must have been in high school. So what tilted you over the scale even before your accident?
mm. I briefly volunteered again because of my mom. I briefly volunteered in the pediatric unit uh, at the outpatient of the pediatric outpatient of the hospital of the military hospital.
Okay. So that kind of tilted the scales for you, and
Yeah,
you said,
I did the seeds, as it were.
okay. So was that relatively, when you took your Bachelor of Nursing, was that relatively close to home, or did you venture off out on your own?
Actually, I got my associate's degree first
Mm-hmm.
because that was at the time being offered, and it just a more affordable and more timely uh, time. Uh, I was able to be able to commute and be able to still work at the local university for 2 years, and then I got my RN to BSN degree, which is about a year and a half through the satellite, which worked at the local university, but it was the main hub was at the Las Cruces, which was about an hour away
Okay.
from.
So where is that in the timeline of you getting an accident? What year did you start your degree, or even the associates?
Uh, Technically, I started in 2005.
How old were you then? If you don't
Um,
mind me, I guess if anyone's good with math.
27-ish.
Okay. So, oh, 27. Okay, so we have to go way back. In what were you doing at the time of your accident?
Bagging groceries
How long did you do that?
for a few months, and then my accident, and then I just once I recuperated and got out, got was back home
Hmm.
about 1999. I started working, getting my what we call prerequisites to get into the nursing program, which was from 1999 um, to 2005. And then in 2001, I was working as a dietary aide at the nursing home.
So were you deterred? Were you discouraged? Because I did not know that you had an accident and you broke your neck. Were you from, how was that healing process? Because I mean, we have an incident here in our family where someone got in a car accident. So, you know, my dear wife is a little scared to drive now, thinking, "Oh, we're going to be next." Or how was that process for you? And I mean, that's, you didn't just cut your finger, right? You broke your neck and you were hospitalized for several months.
And I also broke two bones in my hand.
So you did hurt your hand. And so how, what, I mean, and then you got a degree. So how was that road a bumpy road? Were you, were you able to stay focused? Did that fine tune your focus ability? What? How did that
Um,
work for you?
yeah, I was able to stay focused. I mean, I during the first year of recovery, I was a little afraid of driving a car, not because of getting in an accident, but mostly because I was just still recovering how to use my
Yeah.
neck.
Okay.
So, but mainly I think I was recovering pretty well and just still, revving up the idea of, getting uh, my nursing degree and just getting a career.
That's one. So how long were you uh dietary
Eight,
what aid? Yes.
um, for 6 years.
How was that job? So what is it you're doing for my listeners of what does a dietary aid do? I mean, I can kind of guess what the words say, but what was your job for 6 years?
It's a comprehensive job of working in the dining room, which not it wasn't a very large dining room, but I probably is probably it's small. I wouldn't know how to describe in feet, but it was small enough for me to deliver drinks, drink cart,
Yeah,
and I had to excuse me.
yeah, no problem.
I had the responsibility. Oh, I'm sorry.
We all cough.
Um, I had the responsibility of delivering drinks on to the residents' tables,
Hmm.
and I also had the responsibility of maintaining the cleanliness of the dining room, cleaning the tables, the floors,
Esther,
and all.
do you want to grab a drink?
Yeah, just one moment.
You're good?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. I always keep one nearby. I tend to get frogs in my throat all the time. So you're helping in the cafeteria. Does that include patients or is that visitors to a hospital?
That includes just the residents of the nursing home,
Oh, okay. Okay.
the
And
long-term nursing.
6 years of doing that, how did you then switch into being a registered nurse? Did you come to the end of your proverbial rope? Or
Well, in 2005, I was accepted into the nursing program,
okay.
which was which had both what we call didactic and practicals, which is classroom and real time
Hmm.
learning of how to be a nurse. And so they kind of groomed us into the task that we needed to do as a nurse.
So looking back now to being accepted into the program, was that program difficult? Was that like for listeners? I've interviewed another nurse, but she was from Canada, and just the process of becoming a nurse. Is that a daunting task, or as long as you stay on top, you'll be fine? How did you find it? I
Well,
mean, especially after having a broken neck and facing adversity, but how did you find it?
I I found it, it was a lot of work and a lot of prayers because they set a high standard for the exams, and but I enjoyed learning all the information and learning the new skills, and I just and if if for every test I kept praying and kept moving forward, hoping that I would be able to get that license and be able to use what the knowledge that they have taught me.
So from the time of being accepted into the program until receiving your license, how long was that period?
Um, about 2 years.
So this brings you to around 2007,
Mhm.
yeah. So since then, you've been pretty steady in being a registered nurse. Nothing else has changed?
Um, in 2007, I got a job at a local hospital and on the med surge, what we call the med surge floor, which is the inpatients um, for a 12-hour shift for 3 to 4 days. And I did not do well with that. It
I, I wonder, I was watching something just yesterday about doctors. And maybe it's a there's a common sense reason for it. What is the reason why doctors or nurses have to do like these very long shifts and then a day off? Firefighters and it happens for a lot of maybe these first responders type of positions. What's the reason for the long shift?
shortage here in the United States. It's both doctors and nurse shortages.
But okay, then maybe my math is not good and it isn't. But if you're doing a 24-hour shift, as some people do, or a long 12 whatever hours it is, but then they're giving you 24 hours off, isn't it just one and the same?
Mm,
Don't I But I really don't know. But then I thought, oh, one good reason would be, let's just say you were in the hospital as a nurse and you
mm,
start your shift at 7 and you're there all day, then
mm,
opposed to dividing the day in half, then, okay, I'm the nurse that comes in at, say, a regular 7, whatever short hours are, 7 hours, and then you need to update me on all that happened already, opposed to keeping you there and having you run the day, right? So then all the happenings in the day. Bob came in the morning and Sue's there at lunch and what she has to get, what procedure she has to get done. Then so it's you're managing days rather than splitting them up and having to pass that information on to other nurses or doctors. That was my only thinking, that maybe, oh, that's why they do it. But you were saying shortage primarily.
mm. Yes, and well, it would the way you explain it, it would be ideal to have continuity of care like that to um, be able to have enough information to pass to somebody instead of having like five different
Hmm.
nurses working
Yeah,
with the
especially for the patient too, right? If see three, and I was in the hospital this year with my mom, and even over the days it was annoying. So how much more would it be if it was one particular day that someone comes in who does not know the person's case and then they're asking these same questions, right? So if
yes.
it's Monday and then Tuesday another nurse comes in and asks the same questions, they don't really know you, there's no relationship being, and some of that is, as you mentioned, in your experience of breaking your neck. Is that the experience, your accident, I don't know, experience of breaking your neck. um, you found solace, you found comfort in the way the nurses treated you, and
Mm,
that is harder to develop if, in one day 3 different nurses come to see and read your file and see what's going on. It's a little bit better over the day, but what's even best if it's the same nurse,
mm.
which is near impossible because that means you have to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what was it for you that got you off of, was it just primarily the shift, that 12-hour shift? What was your initial problem from the first job that you received after becoming a registered nurse?
It was was working the night shift and I had difficulty trying to contact the doctors or the on-call doctors about my patients and trying to get
what time is night shift start and end?
7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Hmm. Horrible.
And also had difficulty with coordinating with the pharmacy in hospital pharmacy about medications and it just and trying to find the right equipment like IV poles and
But I mean, what you're saying is then it's a common problem for everyone that works that type of shift. You're hitting a wall. Like I need to call Dr. Doolittle or whatever, and he's not answering or she's not answering. I
Mm.
need to call Mr. Pharmacist, Mrs. Pharmacist, and they're not answering. So everyone has that because it's late hours and they're not working or they're busy or something like that. How is that? Um, how would that be a problem for you if that is the commonality? So, okay, I can't get in touch with them. So what? I can't get the pharmacist. So what? The patient A, B, or C, you just have to wait because I can't do anything. How did that become a frustration for you? If it was a frustration, or how did that become a blockage for you?
Maybe it was I don't have that really good people skills, so I didn't really have a good rapport with my charge nurses and the other personnel I worked with, trying to communicate my frustrations and my
Okay.
issues and trying to brainstorm with them. It just, we didn't click that well enough for me to be able to, okay, what ideas do you have about the situation? And so that was one of the barriers.
Were you able to, and I think that shows humility to realize that you weren't just able to deal in that situation. Were you able to see in your coworkers or the head nurse something that they had that they were able to cope in that situation time frame that either you longed to have or at least respected them because they were able to do it? Were you able to see that in them? What was it that they were able to do in that, especially that time frame where it's hard to be a nurse because you're held back? What characteristics did they have that you noticed? I mean, it could be just a, was it in French and blasé, or you just don't care, like psh, doesn't matter, Esther, just relax, okay? It could have been just a nonchalant attitude. Did you recognize something that they were able to do?
No, not really.
They just didn't care. You
No,
care, they didn't care.
they just seemed to be magically able to handle it.
Yeah,
That's the only
but I mean, it's good that you
way.
recognize that. So
Yeah.
how did that determine where you went or what you did next? What did you?
I Well, when I left the hospital, I did try to contact like other facilities, um, such as the public health office, doctor's offices, uh, and I just seemed to hit a wall with finding a job
Okay,
in
how was that transition? So you were disliking your job, and how many years did you say you worked there?
at the hospital.
Yeah, not
8
not
months.
years, 8 months. So when did you start becoming frustrated? Day one?
Frustrated.
Day one?
Hmm?
Did you say, pardon?
What do you mean? What do you mean frustrated? But
Frustrated with not being able to deal with that time of day shift and all of that. When did that become, when did
mm,
you realize that it wasn't for you? 8 months,
maybe 5.5 months into it.
5.5 months. So at 5.5 months, how are you feeling about your direction? Was it, I need to get out of here, and or I need to get out of here and this is what I'm going to do? So you're dealing with 2.5 more months before you actually got out of there. What were you thinking? What were you planning? So thinking of this podcast of why we work, if you're not happy with your position, it wasn't necessarily, I don't think, you weren't happy with nursing. It was just you were finding this wasn't for you. So what was going through your mind? How are
Mm.
you going to get out of this? How did you get out of it? How did you go through that process? Because then even you said you were coming across some difficulty later on. So did you plan it out well, or in hindsight, did you not do it as well as you should have?
Mm,
So
I
after 5.5 months, you realize, oh, this is not for me. So what did you do?
Well, it wasn't necessarily not for me. It was like, well, this is getting very difficult.
Mhm.
And but so I was in a very heavy case of denial. So I was like, okay, I will continue to carry on, and maybe I'll magically get whatever they got,
Yeah,
the other
yeah,
nurse
yeah.
got. And and it was just too, I was hit just at the end of 8 months, I was hitting just too much of a brick wall. And I just,
So that's 2.5 months of saying it's getting harder and harder, right? It was you couldn't find magic and there was no spells you could use. So it was harder and harder. But in your mind, were you thinking, I want to go to a different hospital or a different shift, or was it
mm,
just you got to the 8 months and you're like, I'm done? Was there a plan?
um, well, it was not more of a plans, more of like being confronted by my supervisors.
Okay, okay. So it just came to an end. Like,
Yes,
this is not going to work.
yeah, they weren't happy with the results they were getting with me, and
Well, you weren't happy, therefore, the results. If you bring that to sports, if the quarterback is not happy with his team, it's going to show in his performance, right? Or
mm,
any sort of job. It's understandable. So when you were confronted at the end of 8 months, so I mean, even for listeners, if you're finding, like, maybe what would you say to someone just now, just in that time frame when you're finding in the 5.5 month period, this doesn't seem right, and the 5.5 period plus 1 day, no, it still doesn't feel right. Plus 2 days, no, it's getting worse. Plus 3 days, because you had 2.5 months of it getting worse.
mm.
In hindsight, how would you have maybe done that differently so you didn't come to that wall at the 8th month? Or would you have done it differently?
I I don't I don't know how I
Really?
would have done. Yeah.
Would you say maybe just looking for a different job? Like just looking internet, just seeing other,
Well, I was hoping also back in my mind, okay, just if I could just get 1 whole year of experience at the hospital, that would look good on my resume.
okay, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I was really trying to shoot for. But
Okay, that's admirable.
and,
I mean, that's a good thing. You want to throw that on the
and
resume?
yeah, and I just thought, okay, maybe if it doesn't work, I can get. They need nurses, so maybe somewhere. I didn't really
Yeah.
have a concrete plan B going on in my head
Yeah, so
until.
you're grinning, bearing it, right? You're like, I'll see if I can get through it for just the year. I would suggest, if people come across situations like that, is, just look off to the side, like, okay, maybe I could do something there. At least you know where you want to go in that year, right? There's
Mm,
nothing wrong with trying to throw in that year and getting one full year. It, it's better. Maybe, obviously not, because you still have a job and you're still,
mm,
I mean, in hindsight, just these little bumps, if we can smooth them out a little bit, is just to look around and see, especially because you were new to nursing. I mean, you
mm,
had the dietary aid experience, but this is a little bit different beast of
mm,
figuring out these different jobs, these different schedulings, the hierarchy within the hospital, and just talking to some people, even some of the coworkers, and maybe you know just getting as much information as you can while you're going through that difficulty, so that when you either are confronted with it's time to go, or you do reach that 1 year mark, you have a plan, or at least you thought it
mm.
through, not just, if I could just get through this, because obviously you didn't, right? So
Yeah.
it's a plan, just get through it. But also, for this is just about work, right?
Right.
Just having it doesn't hurt to look at a different hospital, right? It doesn't hurt to look at a different job. I mean, for some people it's looking at a different career, right? Different further education. Well, if you got this far, maybe if you just did this one more thing, and then this would get you to the place where you would be really successful. So at 8 months, how long was it before you found another position after you
Uh,
finished that?
well, about maybe 5 months later, I ended up working um, at the at a call center,
Oh,
totally out of
really?
course. So I
Ah,
was trying to get some income. I worked at the call center at a national flower company, and
so
that for
what was
seasonal work.
what was the what was were you l-
Oh,
at the end of
I was,
your 8 months, were you still wanting to be in nursing, or were you
yes,
not 100%? You're like, I want to be a nurse. I just need to find a job.
yeah, I was still wanting me being
Were
a
you
nurse.
were you
Uh,
applying?
yes, I was applying
So what
to.
were you coming up against? What was the difficulty? Because you mentioned before the reason why uh, shifts are so long is because of shortage, and everyone knows there's a shortage of nurses. I mean, not everyone knows, but the idea is there's nursing is a good position to get into because they always need more nurses, and it's a high demand job. So what were you getting interviews? Was your resume not seen? I don't even know. How do you go find a nursing job when you're a registered nurse? What is the process?
mm, just it should be any like any other job. You're posting online, looking into classifieds. You're um, trying to just go to whatever medical facility, doctor's office, nursing, long-term uh, nursing home.
So were you actively doing this? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm always under the impression that if you do not have a job, your full-time job should be finding a job,
Yes.
right? Like full-time, not I threw a resume on the internet, or I called someone today. No, it's you don't have a job. Your full-time job is finding a job. So were you in that 5 month period of not having a job and then getting a call center job? Were you diligently seeking, or were you limiting yourself, either one, by not making it your full-time job to find a job, or two, defining what you wanted so narrowly that it restricted you on your ability to get a job? Like, were you willing to go to another city or state, or what was restricting you the most? Or was there
Mm,
just no jobs at that time?
um, just basically I think my shyness kind of restricted me because I just,
Sorry, your what restricted you?
my shyness, being reserved as a reserved person, kind of person. I,
What is the word that you're using? Your what?
shyness, shy,
Oh,
SHY.
being a shy person.
Yes.
It made it hard for you to be actively engaged and more aggressive in finding a job.
Yes.
I mean, you broke your neck. Like, come on. you you walk in the office and say, "Listen, I broke my neck. Give me a job." And I'm good, right? Like you gotta work with what you got. You don't need to be shy. You did well in school and you could hold your own, and you don't need to be shy. Listen, I need a job, right? You don't need to be shy. You got to get a job. You got to pay the bills. My mama wanted me in a hospital. I need to meet that doctor soon. You're ticking on my talk here, talking on my tick. So you were not active. You were not. You don't need to be aggressive, but you were just not as forth coming with being act. Did you feel discouraged?
I didn't like that fact I didn't get my full year. I didn't feel worthy
So
enough.
you didn't feel worthy, or you're angry?
No, I didn't, I didn't feel worthy. Um,
What?
I didn't feel worthy because I'm that kind of person who goes, I cannot have a front. I'm the type of person who goes, well, maybe.
Maybe you're
Uh,
not, did you feel maybe this isn't for me? I'm not good enough.
no, well, I
People
thought
don't
I was
love
good
me.
enough. I was willing to learn. I was willing to be a sponge and learn, and
Yeah.
I'm a good team player. It just, I'm just, when it just getting that first step, you know, right, getting my foot in the door,
Hmm.
I have a hard time getting myself to put that foot in the door.
Did you, so when you, in the 5 month period, did you have, just by passing your resume in or going to things, did you have some opportunities for interviews or even the resume wasn't working?
Mm, I had one interview, and it was a clinic in Las Cruces, and they liked me, but they told me because I did not learn know Spanish well enough as a second language, I could not work there because apparently they have some clients who
Hmm.
don't know English very well. So
Yes. Okay. Okay. So eventually, then you said you needed the money, you needed some work, so you went to a call center. How did you get that job?
I applied because um, they were they had like radio promos about
Yeah.
coming to do this,
You weren't
and
shy about that because you were desperate at this point. 5 months on, you're like, I need some money. You need to give me some money now.
let me do anything.
Go back to begging. So how long did you do that? And what, I mean, call center jobs are difficult, I think. I mean, you're what product were you selling? Something? Were you
Flowers. I was on the sales team for the flowers.
flowers?
Yep,
I mean,
flowers.
that might be a little bit easier to sell. No, I don't know. Flowers are nice opposed to
Well,
insurance or something.
the neat thing is they called me and then I don't call them, so I just take orders.
Oh, okay, that's good then. So you don't, that allows you to be shy, or I mean, "Oh,
Yeah,
okay, I'm here to help you." I mean, that
yes.
seems like maybe a little bit in line with your character. How long did you work at the call center?
Um, month and a half.
Month and a half. So in that month and a half, were you still looking for a nursing job?
Yes.
Okay. So why a month and a half?
Seasonal work, and it was a seasonal job,
Mm-hmm.
and um, they told me okay, and at the end of that month and a half, the orders were not coming in as much, and I wasn't laid off, but I wasn't invited to go further.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
So
to the sales. It was a
after that
mutual.
divide, after not working as the in the call center, how long before you got your next job
3 weeks.
doing?
I'm what I'm doing right now as a registered nurse in
Well,
home care.
well, how did you find, so then that 3 week period, was that the time in which you found this job, or was that something you were looking into during your month and a half? Or was it something
Um,
you threw your resume in a while before?
um, it was about 3 weeks, and then I saw an ad in the newspaper
Yeah,
for nurses, which I haven't seen before,
yeah.
and so I said, okay, well, couldn't hurt to do it. So I applied and got interviewed and was hired within 2 weeks.
So in, so this is the job you've been doing. So how long have you been in this now, this particular
uh,
place?
12 years.
12 years. And have you received a promotion, or is your job been the same? Like before you were dietary aide and then you went into registered nurse, but now you're registered nurse. Is this where you've been for 12 years doing the same particular job?
Yes.
So
Yes.
as a registered nurse where you are now for a good chunk of years, 12 years, what does your day look like, and how is it different than your previous job where you didn't like the night shift, and how do the two compare?
I'm working at 8-hour shifts for 5 days a week. Um,
AM starting from and ending?
9 a.m. to um, 5 a.m. ish, depending on what's going on with my patients.
You said, sorry, you said 9 a.m. until when?
To 5 p.m. ish,
Okay.
depending on what's going on with my patients.
And
Uh,
you're comfortable in that time frame, one.
mhm,
Yes. What
yeah.
does your typical day look like as a registered nurse in New Mexico?
Um, well, I'm working with special needs clients who need total care. Uh, they need their medications. They need to be changed. Um, they need to be helped to go to the doctor's office. Uh, and it um, it's basically working on one with a patient and in their home, just doing for them what they can't do for themselves.
So you're going to people's homes,
Mm,
so you're traveling a lot.
not not really, just it's two clients
Okay.
mainly. So I'm not really doing any traveling, and they're right here in town.
So over the 12-year period, you receive, for many various reasons, different clients, but you keep a base. Is
Actually,
there
I've been working with the same two clients
You've
for
been working with the same two clients for 12 years?
yes.
I mean, you develop a relationship there, don't you?
Hmm. Yes.
Is it two is the maximum or the minimum?
The maximum.
So each registered nurse in this particular industry.
No, just for these kind of clients. There's that. There's other types of work into home care for nurses where they might, and it depends on the also insurance
Okay.
because insurance dictates how many hours my client can have, and with the insurance that my two clients have, they're allowed 20 hours each a week for nursing. But other clients, like VA clients and some elderly and some people who have just gotten out of the hospital with after surgery or whatever they ended up in the hospital for, they might have lesser hours.
So do you
So
divide your day? Do you divide your day between the two clients, or do you rotate days with each one?
no, I divide each day between two clients.
Okay. So you have a little variety in your day. What is, for the 12 years of this particular position, what is most difficult about what you do? I mean, you're going to someone's home for 12 years, right? Many marriages don't last that long, but you're with these people for a long period of time. You're not only just giving them medicine, you're knowing them, you're knowing the little things that they like, they don't like, what annoys them, what annoys you. Like there's a real bond being developed. I mean, could be a good one, could be a bad one. What is most difficult about what you do? And looking at a 12-year period, I mean, it's giving you some good insight about your position.
Mm, um, I think the most difficult would be talking with this medical supply companies and the
Back to the
pharmacy.
same problem. It's the
Yeah, but
same problem you
doctors,
had before. Yeah.
but
Maybe
the
that's it.
doctors are
Go
better
ahead.
at home care.
Can you say that again? The
The doctors are better with the home so far.
I think the Wi-Fi is cracking up. The you were saying the doc. I'm guessing the doctors are more available for home care,
Yes,
and
they're not more available, but they seem more. You can work better with them. I guess it would be they're more approachable. I guess it would be better terms.
more accessible. Uh, so it's funny that the pharmaceutical companies are hard to deal with regardless of the time of day, right? Getting
Right.
getting what it is you need. So it's you were insightful when you first got your job. There's a difficulty there and you couldn't do it. And even 12 years in, it's the same difficulty minus the doctors because maybe it's just the time thing. The doctors like don't bother me after 6 o'clock or something. So that's interesting of a difficulty you have. But that doesn't bring a difficulty in with the patient. That's just a process that you need, which helps the patient. Is there a
Mm.
difficulty in the job that you do with the patient? Like I don't want to go over lines like um, a patient client privilege or anything, but is there a difficulty in trying to help? I mean, you're by yourself. Um,
Mm.
some difficulties in the performance of your job. I met a nurse when I was in Canada with my mom, and one of the nurses that day hurt her back because there was a male nurse and he usually helps lift and clean or something like that process, and she couldn't do it or she had to do it without the help. So she pulled out her back. And I asked another nurse who was telling me about this, and she said that's one of the hardest things is getting patients up that are not normally mobile. And this is dealing with patients that are a little bit different situations. But the physicality of your job for you about the job inside the home with you one-on-one with the patient for listeners getting into nursing because it seems like many jobs have the problems of just if I can get the suppliers and these external people because they're not here, those tend to be common problems regardless of the industry. But on a one-on-one with the patient, what is something difficult that you come across, especially with the same people for 12 years?
Mm.
Or maybe
I
maybe
can't.
you love your job and there's no difficulty. It's just it's just those
It,
pharmacists.
yeah, just external people.
Really? Well, that's good. So it shows that you like your job. Then what is something that brings you the most satisfaction in your job?
Uh, no, just knowing that when I leave at 5 p.m. that that they're still there. That I know that seems probably going to seem like weird to say that, but they're still there. They're still alive. They're okay. They're stable, and I'm just happy to be able to. They got what they need for the most part that I could get them to them and for them, and it just knowing that they're. I just like that they're okay and I can leave them at and go to my home and not have a clear conscience about that, not worry about, okay, did I forget anything? Did I don't have any of that kind of worries.
That doesn't sound weird at all. That sounds like you care. It's like, I mean, it would be different if you're like, okay, 5 o'clock, gotta go. I gotta get out of here, and I don't care anymore. But no, you're caring. That doesn't sound. Maybe at this day and age, I don't know. It sounds weird that you care. Maybe I don't know, but no, that certainly doesn't sound weird. Esther, what is something about your job that you would like people to understand? And you're 12 years in, so you're, in my view, a veteran, right? You know the ins and outs, in more particular of these clients. But what would you like people to know about your job and what you do as a registered nurse in home care that maybe they don't
Mm,
understand or appreciate?
it's really hard to say. I, I can't really think of anything. It's
Well, I was speaking to someone yesterday, and they're in the military, and they brought up some things and some other roles that she has, is that some perceptions. So, perceptions, I'm making this up, but just off the top of my head, maybe from a doctor's position, well, nurses, they just complain. They're not doing as much as they say. From a nurse's perspective, or other people who are more empathetic of nurses, is like nurses are overworked and underpaid, like a teacher. um, and then by you shedding light on your actual job and your duties, that could give some balance there and understanding what it is. So understanding someone else's perspective of what they might think of you, um, and your insight gives people a clearer picture of what you actually do. So in that, are you able to think, maybe some people think, I even really off the top of my head, okay, you're a home care nurse. You're not really a nurse. You're not in a hospital, right? Did you ever think of that someone might think those things about your position? You're not dealing
mm,
with cuts and bloods and gunshots and that stuff. That's not, you're just giving people medicine and watching TV all day beside them.
no, I never really thought of that until
I'm making this stuff up, but just,
now.
I mean, if you
Okay.
think about it, there people can twist things whatever way you want, but you have the stage to say, um, no, my job, I do some work.
Mm, um, assessing, uh, assessing my client, helping them, and each day is unique. It's you're also not taking care of the physically, but also psychologically, where oh, you're taking care of them physically and not just psychologically,
Hmm.
and you can't just walk out.
Just one
Um,
second. So having people understand about your job, it is a difficult job. You do work,
mhm,
and it's a job that's appreciated by your clients, and in the hospital industry in general. Can you think outside of your job and give me a tip or a top tip for people getting into work? So if you're thinking, okay, well, when I was 18, I wanted to stop getting my allowance and get out and make my own money. It was good for me. It wasn't good for me. I was shy about being more active and getting my job, and it worked out now. But if I would have done something differently, this is what I would have done. Do you have a tip for people getting into job, or even, I think you have a really good story where you were dissatisfied with your job and you recognized it
mm,
and you made a change one way or another. You know, you came to the end one way or another, and then you went through some period of time, but it kept you on that path. You seemingly were not deterred by being a nurse. even though you stopped being a nurse for a period, but then you got back on it and now you've been doing it for 12 years. Do you have a tip for my listeners of what is the best way for them to get into work, or what is best for them to put their best foot forward?
Mm,
Just a tip, some advice.
assess, to be able to look into yourself and assess what you want to do and what skills and what abilities you have, because um, there are jobs for both introverts and extroverts people. um, Assess the needs of your area of where you're living at, and sometimes you might have to actually think about moving
Mm-hmm.
outside of where you live to find the job that you want. And um, if and don't be afraid to get that first work exper- work experience, because sometimes it may be able to be the right foot in the door to be able to get you to the first step. Maybe you'll meet somebody like a coworker or boss who can be a mentor to be able to help you, um, to for you to aspire to get where you need to go. And you may not be able to get where you want to be right at the get-go, but you just have a plan. Know your own limits, and um, and just have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D.
Mm-hmm.
But um, the job for you is out there. It's just you have to look for it, and hopefully it will look for you, and at the same time.
That's really good advice, Esther. How do you, besides work, how do you find some people call it a work-life balance? What do you do outside of your work so that it doesn't seem like all you're doing is working? Where do you find some balance, and what are some things that you do maybe to rest?
Well, with the COVID, it's a little bit difficult. Uh, I used to be go to the movies on a regular basis,
Mm-hmm.
go to the local theaters and see plays,
Mm.
and sometimes I just play a little video game if I'm not feeling in the mood to be around people. And I sometimes read. Mm,
You mentioned COVID
mm,
and being in home care. How has COVID affected your job? So 12 years, and this is, how would you rank 2020 in the other 11 years of your work, or even if you want to say to the other work you've been doing, but within the 12 years of being a registered nurse, especially with these same people, how has 2020 been different, or is it basically the same for you in what you do? What are maybe some challenges?
mm, it's been basically about the same for me, but I know that um, some of the insurance companies have pulled back on home visits for the patients, and right now I can't get my own patients to their doctor to see their doctors in person, and so I had
You
to
would
help.
you would think home insurance would be covering home visits more, since people
Well, they're
people are
kind of
told to
scared.
be home, right?
Well, they're scared of having the virus spread to those, especially on the most vulnerable populations.
But then it's like a catch 22, right? If the people who are, say, the most vulnerable or who need home care are not getting care, then they're in trouble for a different bunch of reasons.
Yeah, it's. it's just a kind of a really sad thing to see that happen for those patients.
Are you able to talk with or visit other hospitals and see how they're dealing with it, or is that completely separate and not part of um, maybe your responsibility or anything on your radar of how difficult it is for registered nurses in hospitals? And you might even be thankful that you're no longer in a hospital that has to change a lot of the ways things are done.
No, I don't have access to anybody in the hospital.
What being a nurse, a registered nurse, and going through some of the difficulties, whether it's a broken neck or a loss of a job, being, mutually let go from the call center, what is something that you wish you knew starting out that you would like to tell someone about now that may be in a similar situation? I mean, there's so many people who in high school either never got a job, uh, or as you were in between a few different career paths. And some of those are big decisions for people to get into college or into university, pick this program, not pick this program, or go travel. What is something that you were able to learn along the way that you wish you would have known previously?
Mm, maybe just understood nuance working working in the hospital,
Can you repeat that? I think
and
I'm,
I
can
just
you?
wish I knew the yeah, I wish I knew the nuances of working in the hospital. Just of how to the interactions and relationships and
Where would you
what
chalk that up as how would someone do that? So if you're talking about being a nurse and understanding the nuances of the hospital and the relationships, how would someone gain that prior, besides the way you did it? How would you get that? I mean, watch ER, or I love those hospital TV shows and real ones too. I love watching those, and you can see how people work, but how would someone get that real practical experience? Or
I I don't think can be gained without actually living through it. In, because I there's some nurses who can be a part of the hospital experience for many years, and there are some who are like me who just can't really cut it. It's just until you get your feet right in the water, it's really hard to convey exactly how it is.
so yeah, I guess what you're saying is wishing you knew, or at least knowing that there's a lot that goes on in the hospital besides the actual job, and
Mm,
be ready for that extra challenge,
mm,
even though you can't go lift some weights and be trained for it, right? There's nothing that you can actually do to get it. Watch some TV shows, maybe talk to people like you, right? Talk to other nurses and get the inside scoop of how things, what is the relationship really between a doctor and a nurse, or those in the administration, or those outside like the pharmaceutical reps and all of those sorts of things. Talking to, you even said that in your advice, right? Tip of
mm.
just going out and finding as much information as you can, being aware of that position. And that goes for any job. Find, you wonder why companies are on social media and they put so much money into marketing, because they're researching, you know, the the audience that they want. And for us to find a job, really we should be doing the same thing. And if someone wants to be a nurse, you're not going to get all the information, but the more you research, the more you'll find out and you'll be prepared. And so I think what you're saying is good to say, be ready, even though you can't experience it all.
Mm,
Talk to as many people as you can, and at least you'll know that you're getting into a war. You're
mm,
getting into a tough situation, and if you're willing to face that, knowing what you're up against, then you'll be okay.
yeah.
It's what would you say in your work? Um, what is one of the biggest mistakes that you've made, but you learned from it, and that you can take something with you in your career? What is a mistake that you made that you learn from?
Mm,
I mean, you could even think going to that first job, right? Where you found, oh, this wasn't for me. And that could go back to the advice that you're saying is find out more information, right? And I learned the more information I have. What is a mistake that you made that you learned from?
mm, I can't really.
No, there's nothing. I mean, it takes, we're learning always from our mistakes, right?
Mm,
We learn because, I mean, you could be one of the very few people in the world that's never made a mistake. But there's also the thing of not want to reveal mistakes because then it might show something. But the idea of knowing that our mistakes, and you said this a moment ago about a person getting into nursing, you're going to learn as you get into it. You're
mm,
you're going to learn once you're on the job, once you get your feet wet, but you're also going to make mistakes along the way. And then that's when the real learning comes because you're going to learn, well, no, I tried this path, but that path didn't work for me. Esther, is there anything else that you've given some very good advice on getting into work, tips, but some encouragement for people? And think you were, I don't know, at 18, if you were thinking like, wow, I'm at the pinnacle of my career bagging groceries, or when you were in your 20s laying down with a broken neck for several months, you're like, wow, this is the wonderful life. I don't know if you thought, oh, in your fifth month or sixth month of your first nursing job, if you thought, oh, this is as good as it gets, or when you finish that job at 8 months, uh-oh, I don't have a job and I just went to university. I'm gonna have to pay for this, or, what's my mom gonna think or dad gonna think? And then you get kind of end your calling your call center career position, and then you're without a job again, and then you finally get your job. All of the thoughts and emotions that you go through along all of that adversity, is there anything that you have to offer to encourage people, encourage my listeners of why we work in their work?
mm. There's, I mean, there's, as an adult, there's just more to life than, sitting around at home and mooching off your parents. And I, I like, I don't like work. I'm not one of those self-obsessed
Hmm.
workaholics who like
Yeah.
to go to work, but I don't like being sedentary. I, I like the idea of going someplace and getting something done, even if it's just bagging a grocery, all you're doing is just putting groceries in a bag. Going out there, and it's not just the money either, because you're not always going to get paid the big bucks. It's some sort of stimulation, be able, and satisfaction that you're giving a service to somebody, even if it's even if you don't have really customers and you're working with, your um, coworkers on a project or something, just it's there's something so satisfactory about work that um, it it shouldn't be a reason for you to stay home and mooch off your parents or the government. It's it's and it's not that you're a worker bee, that you have to be there. It's because you want to be there, and it it's giving you but just making you productive enough, and you can do what you want outside of that time at work. You can have your extracurricular activities of playing games, of chatting with your friends outside of the work. I it's hard to contextualize that to somebody who has never really experienced that.
Yeah, we try to, um, when we're younger, we think I thought I knew everything or everything that I needed to know, and then we can say these truths, um, but they're not always adhered to. They're not always listened to. Mm, You know, not mooching off your parents or the government. Some go, yeah, I'm gonna do it for as long as I want. But those things, um, if let go, they instill some bad habits along the way. So having some wise wisdom from yourself to say, it's not the right path, and there is a job for you, and you can stay
Mm-hmm.
productive. You can do something that's a service to people, things you can enjoy. That's great advice. Ester Lee, if people want to reach you, do you have a way that people could, maybe about nursing or living in New Mexico or the latest movies or books?
No, I don't have anything like that. Just Ester Lee NM at AOL.com.
Yeah, email. Yeah, that's good.
Or
Yeah, I think you have a lot of insight. You have a good career going on for you. You face adversity and you seem to do it without complaint. And I'm sure your clients, your patients appreciate you. You've had a long standing relationship with them. As I said, 12 years is a long time. Esther, I have one more question for you, and that is, why do you work?
well, the primary reason is to I work for a living to pay for the bills, but I work because I just cannot see myself, staying at home. And right now, I'm my primary source of income, and until something socially happens that's different, I cannot self.
That broke off on the end part of what you said. You said until that happens differently, or until something socially different happens. What was the last part?
Yeah, I can't imagine not working.
Not working.
Yeah, it it's both a lifestyle for me right now and source of income.
Well, Esther Lee, I appreciate the work that you do. Again, your patients obviously would appreciate the work that you do. Registered nurses are appreciated not only in America, but across the world. I thank you for your work, and you've been a great guest on Why We Work, and all the best to you.
Thank you so much, Brian.